Hey, everybody, and welcome to an all new episode of the One Team We Agree On. I'm Kyle,
I'm Jillian.
and we have a very special guest with us today. He is a freelance writer covering soccer in the greater Philadelphia region and is also the managing editor of the Brotherly Game. I'd like to welcome to the show Matt Ralph. Matt, how you doing today?
Great, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. I know we're chatting a little bit before, but when we started this pod, one of the things we really were thinking about was, who do we want to have on for guests, and like one of the first people popped in my head was you. So
Oh,
it's you've done a lot. Like we were sharing our kind of story with you there. One of the first news sites I kind of stumbled upon was the Brotherly Game. Like just kind of like, hey, where can I get some more union news and yeah, so kind of give us a little bit of like a quick background, like how'd you get into covering soccer and, how'd you work your way up from like USL2 grassroots kind of stuff all the way up to the union?
yeah. So I guess there's a couple ways I can go with this, but my first job, my first career was as a newspaper reporter, and my very first, well, my first job was when I was in college, and I would cover local, town town meetings and zoning boards, and but then when after graduating from college, I went down to Oklahoma and started covering high school sports because I thought that would be fun. And I did that for a little while and realized I didn't really want to do that. I mean, it was fun to cover the big sports, but you get assigned some things that weren't, it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And so I moved back to New Jersey, where I'm from, and got a job working for a daily paper covering basically everything from cops and to
Right.
baby parades and stuff. So that was my first career, and I loved it, and worked at a number of different papers. And then actually before I left, I ended up moving to Indiana and took a job out there. But I was at the press conference when MLS came down to announce that they were planning to put build a stadium at Rowan University, because at the time I was covering higher ed, and I so that was my first. There wasn't even a team yet, and so that was my entry into writing about the union. And so at the time, like I remember meeting some people that were talking about the Sons of Ben before the Sons of Ben began and all of that. And then so I left town, and kind of after writing a bunch about the prospects of Philadelphia market finally getting a team, which, I mean, if there had been a stadium deal in '96, we would have gotten a team in the beginning, but unfortunately it was always the stadium was the sticking point. And so, fortunately the Rowan deal failed, and then they found a better option, maybe not the best option, but still a better option was where the stadium is now. And of course the whole, there's money in Pennsylvania that the New Jersey legislature wasn't willing to pony up. So I left town, and then kind of moved back, because my wife got a job in Lancaster. So we were living in Louisville, and unfortunately we were in Louisville before Louisville exploded with soccer. I mean, I'm like,
Yeah.
I go back to Louisville now, and I was like, they have this amazing soccer specific stadium. The university has an amazing stadium, and now they have two pro teams. They had zero pro teams when I lived there, but so we moved to Lancaster, and then that's when the team started. And just it kind of took me a little bit of time to really get into the team, and then we moved to media. We were living 10 minutes from the stadium, and it got a lot easier just to be there all the time. And so I really got into the team, and I was playing in Casa, and this guy on my team was like, I don't even know that he knew that I could write, but he just was like trying to recruit people to write about the union and stuff. And so I started writing some things it was called the Union Dues, and
Yes.
the OGs might remember that one, right?
Mhm.
and then that later sort of became, it was like morphed into like a lot of the people involved in that then kind of moved over to Brotherly Game, and then so yeah, so I just started, I really kind of, so I moved again, and we were living really close to YSC, and so I would just go over there. I had a baby at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
we just go over and watch academy games. And so I really started getting into academy stuff, and so I'd follow that, like write about that. And like I said, I lived in Louisville, and so I really got into college soccer when I lived there, and so I started writing about different things related to that, and just just kind of kept writing, and really kind of leaning on that the journalism background. And then as time went by, I just started doing more, and then looked around and I was like, well, we don't have an editor. I guess it's me now. So, uh, yeah, and that's kind of, it's just, just being committed and passionate about the sport, and having a background in it has helped me to, just kind of enjoy the ride. Really, it's been fun.
Yeah, and it's interesting, bro. Two things. Number one, I didn't know about the Rowan site.
Yeah.
So it was originally going to be in New Jersey, or were they still going to be called the Philadelphia, or and it was just going to be over
Yeah.
there in Rowan area?
Yeah. So it was in, gosh, I still have the article somewhere, but so it was Don wasn't there. Mark Abbott came down, and they had this presser with all the Rowan officials. So at
Mm-hmm.
the time they had, I guess, optioned like a big piece of property. It's called West Campus. It's actually not in Glassboro. It's in Harrison Township. That's too
Okay.
much information. And I actually know the family that sold the property. But anyway, it was a huge peach farm,
Mm-hmm.
and there's now a hospital there, and there's some soccer like training fields for Rowan are there now, and I think ADP uses it, and some other people. But
Okay.
the uh they were trying to get something there because they wanted to really move their on campus sports facilities to the West Campus, and it just they really just needed some infrastructure money and some other things, and so this idea was sort of hatched to have a stadium for MLS, because again the sticking point was always that there was not a stadium plan, like,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time, like this is all, we can go on a tangent about this.
Right.
Like the timing was still feels like they should have had a team in 96, but then they got the team at the wrong time. I don't know. It's just
Okay.
because at the time when they got the team, it was, the model was, I mean, in fact, Farish, who was the president of Rowan at the time, he actually visited Pizza Hut Park for the All-Star game.
Right.
They like MLS like brought him out there, and like this is what the potential is. And I mean, it's Frisco, right? It's super far from the city center,
Yeah.
and so that's where that was the idea. Was MLS realized like we can't make any money, we can't make any progress renting stadiums, because
Right.
not only are we paying rent, we don't get any money from concessions, we don't get any money from parking. It's just it's a it's not the league is dying because of this. So
Okay.
they really went in all in on building these stadiums like where Sporting Park is, where Frisco is, where where Bridgeville was before they moved back to Soldier Field. So there was really this idea of like finding a piece of land that they could get some state money, and in this case, it was a partnership with Rowan, and I think maybe the football team would have played there or something. I don't know.
Ah.
So like the idea of, and now we look back and it's like, oh my gosh, like it's really good that didn't happen,
Yeah.
um, for a lot of reasons. Taking 55 to get to a Union game would not have been fun.
Yeah, for
322 would be
sure.
even worse. I mean, it's
Yeah.
bad enough sometimes getting to the stadium on the other side of the river from there. But
Right.
but yeah, so that was sort of the model at the time, and that's why I always say, like, it's great that Philly finally got a team, but man, if they had gotten a team, around the time that Atlanta came into the league, how different would it be, right? Because
Right.
then the push really would have been for somebody with real money,
Mm-hmm.
to like put the team in South Philly or whatever. So, but yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
That's a whole other tangent.
Right. And that goes to my second goal because, I like you. I kind of love Subaru Park. I
Oh yeah.
like that. I love
Yeah.
that it's in Chester. They're trying to do
Hmm.
stuff there. Like, I know that's been kind of keeps going like, oh yeah, we're gonna try to build the waterfront and all like the original ideas, but you're seeing progress, and it's a great area. I mean, it's a beautiful day to watch a game on. Beautiful day. It's probably one of the nicest views, and we've been to a few of the MLS stadiums. But was there ever an idea to have something like in Center City? Like, because you hear people saying, "Oh man, I wish you would have had something in Center City or like out by the ballpark."
Yeah, I don't remember I mean I'm not an expert on what
No,
happened after that, but I think there were certainly some proposed things, but like Bristol was one of the sites that was proposed as
really.
well. And
Hmm.
Wow.
so I think part of the problem I mean, the harsh reality of what ended up happening was Jay Sugarman is a real estate guy,
Right.
and
Hmm.
they made a real estate deal, right? And included in the real estate deal was a professional soccer team,
Right.
um, and so it always had to sort of be tied into a real estate deal, and there is no real estate deal like that available at that price point, which was very low, and with the state money in a place like in South Philly, right?
Right.
I mean,
Hmm.
there was probably a time when the whole with Spectrum, and maybe there was a time where there was a window to try something else, but again, you go back and you look in sort of the Inquirer and other paper archives, and there you'll find articles about just a discussion of like, why can't Philadelphia have a team? And
Mm-hmm.
there was a proposal at some point to have, a lower level team in the city, but it always came back to there isn't a suitable venue. This, we know from Temple that the whole
Yeah.
renting the link is a
Yeah.
really challenging prospect as well. So, I think it always was going to hinge on some sort of you know combination of like state money,
Mm-hmm.
obviously
Hmm.
the infrastructure, but yeah, and the reality is it's the team has been down, and I always get annoyed when people talk about Chester like it's the suburbs. I'm like, it's not. It's
Hmm.
it's Chester. It's a
Yeah.
city. It's a
Hmm.
city that was once upon a time was a really I mean, Bill Haley in the comments, man. Like,
Oh yeah.
Rock Around the Clock. There's a lot of William Penn landed there.
Yep.
There's a lot of
Hmm.
like incredible history. Martin Luther King spent
Yep.
time in
Yep.
Chester. Yeah, that's fine. And so it's a place that I've always felt like, man, it would be amazing if this city could be transformed and could be brought to a place where it becomes like this, its own, it have has its own identity. And I think there continues to be potential for that. It just things don't happen overnight. And I do think that the I was just there tonight, checking out the space that the Sons of Ben are going to
Hmm.
occupy. And
Mm-hmm.
Tim McDermott, the president of the club, has been very enthusiastic about the just Rainy Street, and I've always like, maybe you've done this too, where you stand on Rainy Street and you're like, this could be a really cool just game day atmosphere here.
We talk about that all the time
Absolutely.
Yeah,
because when we go to Sons of Ben tailgate, we would sit there and we a lot of times after the match we'll go over to
We go to the
an
Larimer
armor
usually after.
yeah,
afterwards, or that or the food trucks, and we're always like, man, could you imagine like shops and restaurants and maybe other stuff where after like a Saturday night match, this place could be hopping still
yeah.
for a little bit. And
Yeah, and like as you look down Rainy Street and you see the stadium and the railroad tracks
mm-hmm.
are there, it kind of has that feel of getting off the tube. And well,
Yep.
for me it was Highbury, my first game in London, but it has that feel
Mm.
of like walking down the street toward the stadium, and then if they can kind of build that up. I mean, there's talk about like some sort of brew hall or something there in
Mm-hmm.
that building
Hmm.
that's now finally empty, that had been occupied up till last year. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of potential for that. for that area. And of course, the story is that they had a lot of these plans, and I've been to too many planning and zoning board meetings over the years
Mm-hmm.
to know that plans are just that, they're plans. They don't always get executed, and sometimes they get.
Mm-hmm.
Although speaking of Roan Boulevard, they built the dang thing. I never thought I'd see it, but it happened. The
Mm-hmm.
development that they did down there, but I think a lot of things happened right after unfortunately, with this recession, and
Yeah.
again, the real estate market in that sense. But this, and I don't think building a bunch more soccer fields is necessarily like an ideal scenario, but I do think it's going to add life to that campus, and it's going to bring more people to that campus. And I mean, personally, I'd rather go there than like all the way out to United Sports myself, or to go to some of the tournaments I go to. But
Yeah.
I think there's going to be, and once that arena gets built, like, you'll see lots of cool things happening there. Like, I think there'll be things that Chester High School will be able to do there that I
Mm-hmm.
think will bring the community out. So, it's going to be an interesting. Um, I mean, I think that whole development, whenever it's finally finished for the WS, whatever it's called, the
Yeah.
Sportsplex, it's gonna definitely add value. But I think it just, even these new parking lots that are being added, and the Sons of Ben lot, and this just this brew hall possibility. And I think that campus is just gonna continue to improve, and if they can work out the public transit thing, then that, I think, at least by 2026, I think
Right.
that would be, or something, but make it that they can improve something by 2026. I think it's just gonna, you know, it's going to improve. It's never going to be
Right.
centrally located. And maybe one day, there is an option where Chester becomes the training center, and there's a place in the city that games get played. But when we ever finally get our NWSL team and all of that, but
It's
I do
gonna
think,
happen. It's gonna happen.
yeah,
I think eventually we will.
yeah, I hope so. And I just think things are just going to continue to grow, and to this is like, if we've learned anything about the team and the organization, is that you know they've done a lot to grow the sport. They're not the
Mm-hmm.
only ones. They're not the only game in
Mm-hmm.
town. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other hardworking people, clubs, and
Mm-hmm.
people in soccer that are trying to make other things happen, like projects in the city. And just had a conversation yesterday, about this FDR Park project and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot to be excited about as a future. And I mean, we're looking at a season where, I mean, basically every game is going to be sold out. So that's
I
going to
know.
be
Yeah, huge.
It's gonna
that's
be
going to be
awesome.
really
Yeah.
And I'm sure, because like you said, when you start covering, you've probably been at games. I mean, we've been to games where it's like the international friendly, there was like, hardly anybody.
yeah,
But now, like, to go from that, and even like last year, just games were like, you're like, wow, there's a lot of empty seats here tonight. Now, like, you're hearing all these stuff like, hey, these games are gonna be sold out. Like, our one rep was telling us, like, yeah, if you want river end tickets, it's gonna be very hard to get them for your friends
yeah,
and family this year.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, I think it'll be huge if they can get the public transit thing, improved. Get a lot of people in there. And, I, for one, am glad that it's in Chester. For us coming from Lancaster, it's definitely just that
Oh
little
yeah.
bit closer and easier than going all the way in, like when we go to the sports complex.
Yeah.
So we like that. But so what
yeah. I mean,
did yeah,
I always complain that from where I live in Delaware County,
yeah.
it takes a really long time by public transit to get to South Philly. Of course, it's nearly impossible to get to Chester. So,
Yeah.
if we can, even a small improvement, public
Right, right. And you hear
transportation could.
the SEPTA stories from the guys on match day all the time. Oh my gosh, they're gonna shut it down. And like
Yeah,
Todd's one guy, Ed, the guy buddy of mine I know there, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, man, if I don't hit the exact time, like I'm Ubering or whatever,
yeah, it's
and
tough.
it is.
Yeah. So what did 2022 for the Union mean to you? And what does the 2023 season hold in the cards for the Union?
I mean, it was just fun, right? I mean, it was I think a season where there was a lot of expectation, and I think most people who follow the team closely would have said that they got to make the final or bust, and they did that. And for 3 minutes, we all thought that they were the champions of the league, and
Yep.
Yeah.
I was planning my coverage in my head, and then the man who will remain nameless
Yep.
dashed all those dreams. But no, I think it was a really exciting season. And honestly, the being in, and I know you were in LA.
Yep. Yep.
You managed to pull that one out of your hat. I'm just like forever like in all of the people who pulled that off, because that was not an easy task in such a short period
Oh,
of
it
time to
wasn't.
get out there. But I was in the stadium, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, man, I was telling somebody, I was like, going to games where we can't be on the field, like this, what the heck? Like that was just an amazing experience watching the
Mm-hmm.
game.
Mhm.
um, I had texted someone from the union that I was, staff that I was going to be there, and they said, "Oh yeah, just you're cool, that's fine, just don't go in the field." And then I sent him a picture, and I was like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Oh, I guess they are letting people on the field." So it was just funny because it was like, yeah, I think it's okay to go on the field because everybody is, but I mean, it was just an incredible experience. I think it was such a testament to what we've been talking about, just the momentum and
Mm-hmm.
people really like getting into the sport. And for me personally, it was really special to see my niece and nephew show up, and you know they joined the party there, and
Mm-hmm.
just it was just such a fun time and fun experience. And I think as someone like yourself, Kyle, like having played soccer like years and years ago when there was like nothing,
Yeah.
and you know you were
Oh
called
yeah.
names for playing soccer and
Yep.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
To seeing that, I think was just really really just really meant a lot to me personally as just a fan of the sport. And to see, I'm a 1 for 5 guy myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't really watch other sports. I mean, I cried when the Cubs won the World Series, but that was like a lifelong thing for me. And now I don't watch them. I'm like, I'm good. They won one. I'm good with baseball. I don't need it anymore. But yeah, it was just amazing, and I think just really kind of to show the growth of where the team was to,
Right.
and yeah, so I think that was incredible. I mean, 2023, you know, I, this team is better than they were like on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, one of the things they've benefited from, I think, is that the league has been pretty crappy. The other teams in the league, not
Mm-hmm.
like
Mhm.
the league as a whole. It's just they've benefited from some of the just train wrecks in the Eastern Conference, the
Mhm.
just the massive decline of Atlanta United.
Mm-hmm.
Um, New York City seems to be the team that just fell off a cliff, maybe this
Mm-hmm.
offseason. Toronto, like what the heck? And so I think every year I always sort of say, like, well, the Union I think will be good, but how good they are depends on how bad all these other teams are. And like
Right.
It's
they've been
true.
pretty bad. I mean, DC United was just has been awful.
Yeah.
And that's not to take anything away from the Union, because they've done what they had to do. It's just
Sure.
how other teams in the league, and so the schedule is probably the fixture congestion is probably
Oh
the
yeah.
biggest question mark in all of this. And being back in CCL is great, but what does that do? And this whole Leagues Cup thing, which I'm just not a fan of,
Mhm.
how that contributes. But there's no reason not to suggest that they're going to win the whole thing, or at
Mhm.
least be back in the final again. So
Right.
Right.
Right. And you hit on the nail because I was putting together like we're gonna do a show towards that week right before on the 25th, and I was looking at all the games. Like there is a scenario like if they really truly, like Jim says, are gonna make a run at all these tournaments, and they got the depth now to do it, you're going to have league play, you're going to have CCL, and you're going to have the opening rounds of the US Open all going on at the same time. And it's just like, and that's also getting into a tough stretch of better teams, I should say, that, we might not be getting points if we don't play our opening line. So it's
Mhm.
going to be interesting in that. And I kind of agree with you on that. What do you think the priority is going to be in your opinion? Like, what are the priorities in terms of,
I mean, I don't think the Leagues Cup is going to be a priority for anybody.
right,
Definitely not in year one. I think it's going to be one of those things where if you make it, then you're gonna try to win it. But um, and maybe some of that's wishful thinking. I hope like nobody cares about it because I just don't like it at all. I love Liga MX. I think the idea of a competition would be great if there were games in Mexico, and there aren't. So
right.
to me, it just undermines the whole idea of the competition and just basically reduces it to what it appears to be, which is a money grab. So
Yep.
I think that's the one that I think for a team for the Union because they're in CCL, and if they make a decent run in that, then they should just play by the reserves or
Right.
like obviously they're gonna have to rotate
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have other games, but during that time off. But I really want to see them win the Open Cup. I'm a huge fan of the Open Cup. I was a fan of the Open Cup as a City Islanders fan before the Union became a thing, and so I think I would just really love to see that happen. If Jim never wins MLS Cup, but he has a US Open Cup before he departs or something else happens with him,
Yeah.
then I think that would be to me that would be because he lifted it as a player, and
Mm-hmm.
I've just always wanted to see him with that trophy, and obviously a double I think would be really cool to sort of see that happen, but with this new playoff format that's rumored, I don't know. That I think that's going to be sort of up in the air as well.
What I love about today in the interview was what Jim was saying
Mhm.
about like he's like we don't even know what's happening. We're 2 weeks away
Yeah.
from the start of the
It's
season. I'm
crazy.
like, wait
Yeah,
a
he's
minute.
like, Paul, you know more about this than I do. That was great.
I know. I'm
Yeah.
like, wait a minute.
Mhm.
That's not a good thing to hear. Like, is MLS you
No.
guys really just keeping
Yeah.
everybody in the dark? And that's got to be frustrating for like Jim and the players because
Mhm.
you got to at least have a game plan going in. And now it's like,
Yeah, and it was I think one of the things that I mean, so uh, last year because of the format,
mm-hmm,
we finally got the Shield winner against the top team in the opposite conference,
Mhm.
right? It hadn't happened in an extremely long time
right.
because the same thing that happened to the Union in 2020 happened to New England in 2021 because you get a week off and you got to play a team
Yep.
that had to win to get to the second round. And I think once you start getting weeks, you bring in weeks off and teams getting momentum. I mean, it's why I hate what they've done with March Madness.
Mm-hmm,
These first four garbage and all that stuff. Like you start to offset a lot of the advantages. And like what was said, I think today is like Jim touched on this, the idea that you win out like they did and that you get home field advantage, but then now everyone else gets a home game. Like
right. Yeah.
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 That was
I,
what, yeah. No, that's exactly when they first started announcing this. I'm like, that's yeah, like he said, we had probably one of the arguably the best MLS Cup finals, maybe in league history this year.
yeah,
Mhm.
Like,
which is
and
crazy because we had the best World Cup final like a couple
yeah,
months, like
yeah.
a
Mhm.
month later or whatever.
So now we're going to go back to something they did years and years ago. And I had gone back prior to this because I was tracking like when they would do those knockout rounds, and there were some weird results. And then it like you would see like these like a team that snuck in beat like a much higher seed team on like knockout rounds and they got into PKs and aggregates. And it was just like, I'm thinking to myself, if a common fan's looking at this, they're going to be like, wait a minute, I don't know what's going on here. Like
Yeah.
somebody that you're
Mhm.
trying to expose to
Mm-hmm.
the league, and
Mhm.
so that's a little concerning for me.
Yeah, I mean, again, to go back to last year, and again, like it that's not to say that it would always work out that way,
Right.
but the fact that the format lent itself to no bye weeks for top seeds,
Mm-hmm.
basically, or was there by wait,
There was a bye week
or
that was
I'm
Oh
announced.
yeah.
sorry,
We had a
sorry,
bye
there
week.
was a
Yeah.
not there no 2 week bye weeks because like
Right.
that
Right.
was the issue before. Um, And so the union had to win 2 games to get to the final, and LAFC had to win 2 games to get to the final. Now, in that format, there's still an opportunity that a team might win 3 games to get to the final.
Mhm.
But it's like you said, it's pretty clear what these teams have to do. A week off is fine, but 2-3 weeks off is suicide. So,
What is?
and then the situation where you got to bring refereeing into this, because if you're playing more than one game and you have a player sent off for a dubious foul, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, maybe you're up 1-0 in that game, and then the other team gets an away goal or whatever it is, and then next thing you know, you're playing without Gashtag or something,
Right.
and you're and like, wait, you won the conference and you're in this situation now, like, why?
Right. And that's why I feel like this is Apple. Well, I'll be honest with you. My personal opinion is this is money grab by Apple. Hey, we want more games. We want, which I get, like Apple wants to make investment on their deal. That's
Yeah.
cool. But at the same time, it's like, how are we going? Because the league's gaining momentum nationally, and her and I are very big on. We want the union to do well, but we also want to see this league grow. Because I'm an
Yeah.
AC Milan fan. I love AC Milan. I love Serie A, but I want to see something here that we can have sort of that in there, and I want to see more people getting it, because we're seeing it. I'm seeing it in Lancaster, seeing more people, but now I'm worried about somebody else that comes in and goes, "What the heck is this?" So
Yeah, it does. It's almost like sometimes it feels like the league just can't get out of its own way, and
exactly.
I do, yeah. I mean, I think the Apple situation is interesting because, as I understand it, so they're doing things a little differently where they're selling partnerships. Like, so for the regular season, corporate people or corporations will essentially buy a partnership, and that'll kind of get them access to the platform with ads. So the regular season is sort of sold, right? Or, I mean, I guess maybe they'll sell some packages as they go, but it's not going to be the same ad buy as you would on like FS1, where your media buyer is buying ads, and it's more of a like you're buying in as a partner, and then you get ads. But then the playoff package becomes another sales package. So if they can beef up the number of games for that, then they can beef up the number of, or the money that they would charge a partner to be an official partner sponsor of the MLS playoffs. So, because at first I was like, well, if they're just selling partnerships for the year, like, why? How they make money? I'm like, oh, it's because that's a regular season versus a playoff, and then the subscribers, which, I mean, for all the noise about the costs, and I understand, I understand concerns about that, because because of how cheap, at least currently, how cheap it is to get all these other leagues. I mean, Peacock's losing like insane amounts of money. So how much longer is it going to be that cheap to get Premier League on there? But so I'm sympathetic to like concerns about costs and access from that, even though there's going to be 6 free games a week. But the money that they're the money that they're making from subscribers is negligible. It's what it does is it's more quantifying people as people with money to spend, so the advertisers will partner with Apple, because if you're an advertiser and Apple comes to you and says, we have 50,000 people in this demographic that you're trying to reach, and they're willing to pay $100 a year, or they have season tickets so they get it included. These are the people that advertisers want to go after because they have money to spend to buy their product. So for me, to me, it seems more that it's about the audience and establishing an audience that you can sell to advertisers or partners or however, whatever you call them, by charging a fee that will essentially people then self-select into that category. So I mean, so that's where, and obviously I think this stuff is going to change every year. I think there's going to be all kinds of package deals thrown at people. I think there's it, you know, we're just gonna see like as this progresses, like each week we're gonna find out. Like at the end of the year, we'll be able to make a spreadsheet and say X amount of union games were free
Mhm.
outside the
Yeah, sure.
payroll. X amount of games were free to TV Plus viewers. X amount of games you could only get if you subscribe to the season pass. So that I
Interesting.
think it'll be interesting sort of to see the how that actually breaks down. Yeah.
That is interesting. I would love to see that data at the end of the year too, because like that's kind of one of the things too, because we hear all this squawking and then it was like, oh my gosh, 40% of the games are going to be free. And it's like, oh, that's not that bad of a thing then, when you look at it to get the people in. What do you think about and this will be the last Apple question. What do you think about it overall? I mean, I know some of the content, like Union's content was kind of, I've seen people say it was phoned in. Its quality's good. Some of the teams did a
Mhm.
phenomenal job, but I've really liked it. I think it's going to be good long term. I just think we're still some teams are catching up. I think Union will be fine long term. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I was actually having this conversation earlier tonight about you know, the whole idea that has been put out there, like why isn't Apple like putting preseason games on there?
Oh
And I
yeah,
was like, because they actually want people to buy their
right,
product, and preseason streams are like not a high quality product.
right,
Mhm.
The on field product, or how it looks with you know cameras set up at training facilities. So um, I think that I mean I have high hopes for the package of it. I mean, I'm not a huge MLS fan. I'm a fan
Mhm.
of American soccer. I want to
right,
see USL, all the leagues grow. I support anything that any player, any team that's associated with the Philadelphia area. But I do think that having and I do but at the same time I recognize that there are people who are NFL fans. I'm not an
right,
NFL fan, but they'll sit and
Mhm.
watch an NFL game, whoever's playing. And so I think whether that's like 5% of viewers or 20% of viewers, the fact that they'll be able to do that, it'll be packaged in
Mhm.
like a way an easy way that they can sit there. I mean, I don't know who has this kind of time, but
right,
they can sit there and watch these games, and then they get a show similar to how the Premier League's being done, right?
right.
I mean, how many Americans have been turned on to soccer? I mean, I know people who like they're not even a fan of a team, which I don't really understand that concept.
Mhm.
They're just like, but they know everything about who's
Right,
who in Premier League, and I'm like, again, I'm more of like I'm like a club over everything. I'm like
right,
club
Mhm.
over country, club over league, club over everything. That's just how I've always been a fan of things. But um, I do think there are people who are into betting and that side of things who
right,
will just be able to sit and see this like high quality, hopefully high quality. I
right,
think
right.
there's going to be
Mhm.
some kinks that'll have to be worked out. Just the runway they gave themselves wasn't great. But I think it's going to be really cool for the league. And it's like Jim was saying today, like I think it's going to be like I think on balance it's going to be a benefit because people weren't watching anyway.
No, they
People
weren't.
weren't watching PHL 17, and so yeah, the free stream on the website was great if you didn't live in one of those weird zip codes like in Princeton or wherever. I don't know if
Right.
you maybe you
Right.
guys had some troubles at times, but
We did.
uh,
And we were like, actually, at one point, like, we'd just be sitting here on this computer that we're like talking to you on, just like watching the game. And then we tried to do our like through a PlayStation and like it would just buffer. And like, I remember what was the one game? It was like a 2-1 road game. And like, it was coming down, and like the other team was pressing and it kept buffering. And then finally, like, I saw like the Union's like 6
I just
nothing
stay
and
off like Twitter because I was
we're
like,
like, oh my gosh,
crud.
we're still 5 minutes behind.
oh
Yeah, I'd be like, oh,
no.
we're so behind. I have to stay off Twitter so I don't get spoiled because yeah, I kept buffering. But yeah, then we'd be like, depending on where we were, it'd say we're like not within the viewing area, but we didn't get PHL 17 either. And then the one time I was like, where was I in Deptford at a hotel? I was there for a swim meet and it said that I was out of range. I couldn't like get it at all. I'm like, what? So
Yeah.
I was like,
My favorite example
yeah.
was I was at a Union 2 game and I could not stream the first team because it was telling me that it was out of the area. So I was like, and I, of course, I posted, I
Wow.
got like tons of retweets. It's like, because I
Yeah.
had my computer sitting there with the field, the stadium in the background. And yeah, and I think the no blackouts thing is huge. I
It
think,
will be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it meant they basically had to, I mean, I don't know what the dollar figure is, but they practically gave Fox like the games they gave them because there's no exclusivity. So there's the cost of it, the value of it was basically undercut. But the on demand, hopefully we'll be able to watch Union 2 games because I barely
Yeah.
watched games on the streams because they were, well, pretty poor quality, but
Yeah.
also they were only live.
Right.
And you know, a guy with kids only has so many 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, windows in his life. So I think that would be cool too if those games are on demand. And I mean, I think they'd said like they'll go back to 2019. I don't know if you've kind of played with that, but
Yeah.
just even being able to watch games on demand, I think will be huge because those were blacked out too,
Yeah.
and which never like so game uh from July of 2022 is blacked out. Why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And the funny thing is, like I like some of the people I talk to, they'll be like, "Oh man, they'll be talking about a game that happened, like you said, like 2018," and I'll be like, "Oh, I can go back and watch that game," and I have. I've gone back and watched a couple games. So
Yeah, I
that's
mean, if you're a DVR person, you were fine, but I think
yeah,
I never did the DVR thing, so
yeah,
I
do
was
we?
just
Yeah. We don't.
I'd use a VPN to watch watch one game.
One last union question. Now, I want to talk some USL and local league with you real quick, but
Sure.
what did you think about the transfer window? And we moved off of Corey and Sergio, and of course Stu. But what do you think? Given the versatility, who are you excited about those three we brought in, and with what we lost, where do you think? Kind of with the depth, like you were kind of talking about, could be one of the deepest teams. Does the forward depth lack of there concern you at all? You think we got something with like some U2 guys because we do have some good young.
Yeah, so I'm definitely one of those people who's been for years saying last few years has been there's not enough MLS people on this team. There's something about getting players who have been through the league, who understand all the
Mhm.
ridiculousness of it that it can be at times. Again, just the travel, there's just so many things that I mean, you've seen it, you saw it with Gazdag, and
Mhm.
we're hoping to see it with Will this year after having
Mhm.
that adjustment period. So I think it was really smart, especially for for players who aren't necessarily going to be the opening day starters. I think there's going to be a lot of changes hopefully this year in the lineups, but I'm really excited about Perea because I think he's
Mhm.
someone
Mhm.
who's he has a cap. He didn't get called up this Camp Cupcake, but he has a US cap and he's, obviously we won't have to worry about him scoring on the Union anymore.
Right. True.
But I think he has a lot of promise and I do the big question about Ali and the future, is this his last year? I mean, if he wins MLS Cup, he probably should
Yeah.
say okay and start wearing a suit to work every day. But he, yeah, so I think I'm excited about him. Jim seemed to be really high on Torres.
Mhm.
Hmm.
You
I'm
know,
really
I
excited
I
about him.
think I think there's some reasons to be excited, some reasons to be like, okay, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I mean, Damian Lowe is someone played at Reading United.
Yep.
Like I think he was a really smart player to bring in to sort of help with the back line. I mean, I do want to see Brandon Craig because I
Hmm.
think he's an incredible young player. He's been super patient and just like waiting
Mhm.
his turn. So yeah, I think I think the depth they've brought in is quality. I like the moves they've made. The question remains, how that impacts players like Quinn Sullivan,
Hmm.
Jack
Mhm.
McGlynn. I think there's a pretty high expectation on Jack McGlynn, but he still did not play a ton last year.
No, I
And
didn't.
I don't think I'm not personally, I think he needs to be on the left side myself. And,
I do too.
I
Mhm.
think Flock has some deficiencies that he makes up for, but Flock also has some real bite defensively. So I think from a depth standpoint, I mean, he said it's the deepest midfield he's ever had, Jim Curtin.
Yep.
And I do think some of the changes that they seem to be open to, and bringing on Torres and on one wing on the left side and Quinn Sullivan on the right side to sort
Mhm.
of run at tired legs. I think that can more than make up for what Corey Burke was doing. And if you need someone to win headers, we know that Chris Donovan can win headers. We don't
Yes.
know.
Mhm.
I mean, from an MLS standpoint, how far they can, how far he can go, what his ceiling is. I think I mean, he was definitely a pro. He's definitely a
Yeah.
pro.
Mhm.
I just don't know from an MLS standpoint. I mean, I've been watching him play since he was a teenager, and I think very highly of him. But you know, I do think like the way they've addressed the Corey Burke departure, I think it will hopefully be
Right.
good. But I always say the caveat is injuries, and that's the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
When teams fall flat after making an MLS Cup final, it's usually because they get unlucky with injuries. So
and
Mhm.
that's kind of the big thing too for me when I keep thinking about like, well, like you said, even like somebody like he played wing at Bromby for a little bit, believe it or not. Like he had
oh
played
yeah,
wing,
that's
yeah, yeah.
right.
He'd like mess like you could do wings with him, Torres, like Sullivan, even Glenn. You could do 2-6, you could do two, that in the back line, you could do a lot of different things, but we keep saying like, wow, like we are one injury away, either in the
Mhm.
spine or up front. That's like, ooh, what's going to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I'm like you. I think it's going to be a great depth, and it's just the
Mhm.
versatility in this team. Like, and the other thing I'm going to be interested in is in-game substitutions with formation changes,
Yep.
because that's the one thing I felt like at times. Sometimes Jim didn't change the formation when he would
Nope.
sub somebody in.
Well, we
I,
didn't have a
I
Nelsinho,
know
and
we
I
didn't.
think Torres sort of. I mean,
Yeah,
I think Sullivan has been that type of player. I mean,
right.
not. I'm not saying he's Nelsinho.
No,
Um, I mean, he would even have to admit he's not Nelsinho. I mean, he's a really quality young player. He's different than Nelsinho, but I mean, but he does provide just so much jump and energy off the bench that um, and I had said before when Jack DeVries was still with the club, like, you bring him in on the left, you got Alcino on the right. So I think it's a
yeah,
similar kind of idea where when you're running at tired legs, and even Sergio, I always thought was better off the bench. I always thought that
yeah.
he was a little undisciplined as a starter, and you always had to wonder about his fitness,
Hmm.
and also, when you have that kind of pace and you're running at guys in the 75th minute, it just hits different.
Right,
Mhm.
So, um,
right.
yeah,
So,
Yeah, so let's talk USL and other teams in the region. What do you think is the biggest misconception, um, given soccer fans out, the teams and the league out there?
the teams in the league out there.
Yeah. So why don't you go on with that
Yeah,
too?
the teams in the league out there, and how good is soccer outside just these MLS squads? Like Red Bulls, the
Mm.
Union, obviously. Like, how good is like the lower divisions in this league for like up and coming talent? Does that make sense?
yeah. I mean, I would say so. I mean, I think we have a lot of really, like we have some really great clubs. I mean, Westchester United is sort of
Hmm.
has a little bit of the mantle at this point with some of they're a year-round club, which
Hmm.
I think gives them an advantage over Ocean City. It gives them an advantage over Reading, um, and some of the other teams. We have one of the oldest leagues, adult amateur leagues in the country, and the USL Pennsylvania, and VE is the reigning champions of that league. Westchester, has won a number of titles historically. United German Hungarians and Philadelphia Ukrainian Nationals. So, I mean, there's just a lot of really quality. And then you get into like Casa and just some of the cool stuff they've been doing on the amateur scene. I mean, I think one of the things that, Westchester has established some really good relationship with the union. I mean, Chris Donovan was playing for them. And they do a lot of friendlies with union too. And so there's definitely a cool sort of kind of partnership that's happening there. And I think a lot of players from the Westchester United program are getting some professional trials with teams. And it's there's just a lot of really quality soccer and players who maybe they're not destined for MLS, but they can still play. And there's some USL2 obviously is the other one, right? With I mentioned Ocean City, Reading United. You have in Westchester and Philadelphia Lone Star. I mean, you kind of go down the list of all these teams. So it's it's great. I mean, I love the local soccer scene and the college. We have tons of college programs around here. And the youth soccer thing is huge too. So I think it's great. Yeah.
It's massive. During the summer, I landscaped with a buddy of mine, and his one of our clients, his son plays for FC Delco, and he was one day just sitting there explaining to me how everything works with like the partnerships, like how the academy and their academy and union have like this loose partnership, and I didn't really know about that. And then I was talking to Jeff, and he was talking about the Roxbury, union thing. So it was really interesting. What do you think makes the Union Academy like? Is it the best academy in North America at the moment? And what makes it so special?
I mean, I don't really know
Yeah,
to answer the first question. I don't
but
really know how you would quantify that. I think they've had some obviously very special players who've come through, and I mean Brendan's
yeah,
rise to the national team has been I mean, he's always been a special player from like the time he was young and the time he wasn't really starting for the team when he was struggling a little bit. But I mean, his rise has been really incredible. I think it's Mark McKenzie, like they've really set a standard for how to behave
right,
as a young, talented player and how your character matters. It's a lot more than just talent. I mean, those guys have incredible talent, but the way they've just the decisions they've made, the approach they've made, the good habits they've formed. And I think being at YSC Academy has been a huge part in that. And sort of, you know, they treat them like little pros. And so they learn how to be a pro when they're not a pro. And so I think the Academy has done really, I always say the secret sauce for the Academy is all
right,
along has been the school and
right.
the work that they're doing there and how they just have so much more flexibility. They have individual education plans. Well, no, that's a whole other. They have but you know what I'm saying? Like
No,
they
no,
have an
Yeah.
yep.
they have an education plan
Right.
specific to each player and student, and so they're able to pursue. I mean, Quinn finished high school early. I mean, he's a really great student, and so he was able to sort of carve a path for himself that where he was at academically. And I'm not going to name names, but you have some people who just that they were never going to go to college,
Right.
and that wasn't their path, and so they're still encouraged to take like post
Right.
high school classes, like things of enrichment, just learning about finances and how to like manage being a pro. And so I think that's really been the secret sauce, if from what I've seen. They've done a really good job recruiting players. You know, we've had a number of players from this area who've made that jump, but then there've been a number of players who weren't from the area that they
Right.
brought into the program, like Nathan Harriel and
Yep.
Jack McGlynn and some others who've done really well. And then really there's a lot of academy grads that are in
Yeah.
MLS.
For sure.
Tomas Romero is with Toronto this year. CJ Dos Santos is with Inter Miami. There's just a number of people you can just rattle off names of players who came through the academy and the school who are playing either at the MLS level or playing abroad or playing professionally in some form. So I think they've done a really good job of identifying talent, developing the talent, maybe as much off the field as on the field, because they bring people in that are already really talented. I mean, it's not like they're, I mean, not, I'm not saying they're cherry picking, but they are a little bit, right? Like that's the point of an academy is
Right.
you
Right.
find the most talented players you can. And then it's really about how do you like, mold
Yeah.
them into a player
Right.
that's not gonna get them, get in their own way from reaching their dreams.
Yeah. And as a teacher, like I definitely was interested in seeing like what kind of, educational program they had going on. I, was looking into all that. And then of course I looked, I'm like, do they have any family and consumer science positions? I think they need to learn some I can teach some nutrition and
There you
personal
go.
finance and stuff. It's like, yeah, you guys get that position. I might need to be applying for that. But no, that'd be pretty cool. But
Yeah,
they,
it's a
they
great
don't
school.
they don't have
I
my
love
subject area though, sadly.
I was just over there recently. They had their signing day for
Mhm.
the students signing letters of intent, and it's a really great environment. I mean, the families, are they have to be so involved,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
mean, I think you always hear when players sign how much you hear about the families and their involvement and
Right.
how the sacrifices they've had to make. I mean, the to play is not is free, but to attend school is not, and all the clubs they played at before they were brought into the academy are not free.
Yep.
Right.
There's a big financial commitment. I mean, it's still a piece that, and I think it's a larger issue about access and
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
the people that are making it to that level generally are a little more well-to-do. That's not to say
Hmm.
everyone is, but we're still trying to figure that out. That's a big thing in this country, right? How do we um, fix the access piece, which is, so many kids don't have access
We
to
we
any of
see it in
this.
swimming.
Yeah, I was just
We
gonna
see
say
we
we see,
see it in swimming.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
big
mean, you
time
get to the
swimming.
national level. I mean, heck, this is back in 97, 98, 99. My dad, we were still paying thousands of dollars when I was at an elite club. And now it's like double even.
I mean, you
I
pay like $10 per event like that you
Yeah.
compete in. Like, I've got even like kids that are like 7 years old, and just for them to swim one length of the pool, that event, that's $10,
And
and
you
then they
spread
go and
that.
get disqualified or something on it.
Yeah.
It's
So
like, yeah, it's crazy.
no,
So
I hear you because I think that is something, I get the financial side. It's a business.
mhm.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you got to keep the doors open. But there has to be an easier way. What that is, we haven't figured it out.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
agree with you with the access piece because that is something that often worries me. Especially, there's talent anywhere.
Mhm.
I've always said that even with swimming, there's talent
Oh
anywhere. It's
yeah.
just
Hmm.
be able to get them in the pool. I mean, we see it with PDR in Philly. I
Yeah.
mean, Jim's been able to get these kids from inner city Philly and has run of the best swim programs in the country at
Yeah, I
times.
mean, they made a movie about it, that movie
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pride. I mean,
But
and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
so
do I do want to shout out Swag because that's one of the programs, and I think the union's been
mhm.
very supportive. Some of the players have been as well to sort of a lot of them will stop by training sessions and everything, and just sort of identifying kids in the city and giving them a free training program so they can, you know, consider soccer as well
Mhm.
when they're a young age, and so just and there's a lot of projects, mini pitches being built, and just Starfinder's another great foundation that's doing amazing things in the city and Manayunk and Chester Upland soccer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're doing great work as well. So I mean, there are like really great people who are doing these things. We just need more of it.
Yeah.
there's
Right.
there,
No.
and
Mhm.
JT Dorsey, I think he was honored at the recent convention here in Philly, and the programs he's involved in, and just some of these clubs like AFC Fairhill and You know, you mentioned Roxborough is in the city. Just some of these clubs are doing, you know, they're really focused on that and giving kids opportunities and access. And it'll be cool to see some of the fruit of some of those efforts down the road.
Absolutely. All right, last question, and if you want to talk about this, let's talk about the brotherly game. Let's talk about your website, and let's talk about, I mean, if you want to, Vox and this whole situation, because like I said, I first found you, going on there because I was a big McCovey Chronicles guy because I'm a Giants fan. So I would always go in there and I was like, wonder if Union have all they do. There's brother game. And then I got into like the Flames Matchstick and Gasoline, which is on Twitter. They're about as active as you guys on. There's sometimes it's like you guys and them, and they're like it's funny. So I read about that, and then so talk to us. Like, what's the situation like? What's the future holding?
Yeah, it's a little still up in the air. I mean, we were informed that, they basically were uh withdrawing their
Mm-hmm.
financial and like other support of the site. They did pay some small stipends to some folks like myself and the assistant editor. It wasn't a lot, but it was sort of we had a contract. We have a contract that expires at the end of the month just to sort of maintain the site and
Mm-hmm.
to keep it going. And then most of the people involved have been volunteer labor under,
Right.
and there's been a lot of reasonable controversy about that and how they've built this media company on the backs of free labor. And
Yeah.
so there are a lot of like things about the whole model that were problematic, and that I wasn't always super comfortable with. And so this came out, and we're still not sure about what we're going to be able to salvage.
Right.
But I mean, we do have a plan in place. We're working through to continue, if not under the name or the brand that we have, but to continue to cover soccer the way we are,
Good.
which is the union and everything else. And I think if anything, like the announcement has just we've gotten some amazing emails from people. I got an email from a player that was just like really, really thoughtful about an article that we had written and how much they liked the work that we do. And people have approached us about different ideas, and it's been fun just to kind of I haven't been doing a lot of writing because I've been spending a lot of time on that
Right.
side of things, but just that people do value. And I mean, I've put a lot of a lot of my time. It's a labor of love. I put a lot of effort into just growing the site and just, being, another, I mean, we have a lot of great media coverage of the team. We're blessed with amazing podcasts, and
Mm-hmm.
you guys are part of that. I like how you're doing things, the way you're doing it a little different. Everyone has a different voice and different experiences, and it's really been cool to kind of be part of that. And I've always felt like my role um, is also, in addition to just covering the team as much as possible, has been just as I'm like kind of the old man here, but like
Yeah.
just connecting people. Although I
Mm-hmm.
guess I'm not much older than you.
No, no, you're not.
We're all
No, no,
that.
no. I mean, and I'll be honest with you. I'm loving, uh, since we've gone here, we've connected with some other, creators in the community too. I'm
Yeah,
loving it. But I'm 43. I'm finding out that there's a lot of young creators out there, and that's awesome because that's what you
yeah,
need
yeah,
for like the union to continue to grow and grow and build and build. And I think,
yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome. But you're right. It's like, they're I do love this community. I love the writing. We're seeing more like Philadelphia Soccer Page. Todd Lewis has got his stuff with the free kick, and so it's good to see that we're getting a lot more union coverage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think my passions have always, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious my passions are in soccer go far beyond the union. And
Right.
my main like focus in all this is just to continue to have a platform where we can do that. And that's my hope that moving forward is that we'll still, I think the things that we're going to do are going to be a little bit different, because we don't have to do things anymore that we were sort of, not that we ever had to. I don't want to make it sound like they had a gun to my head, but just
No.
But yeah,
we were exhaustively covering the team, and we're going to still cover the team. We're still going to cover the sport in every way we can. But maybe we won't do some things that we did before, just because we don't want to.
Maybe you'll cover more, because the one thing I do like about it is I found out about Westchester. I found out about Reading. I found out like one evening she was upstairs. I was going because of one like a site. I started going on like a deep dive of like all the YouTube. Like I was finding out about like, oh, who was it? Like Atlantic City has a soccer team, and like I love their
MPSL,
I love their kit because it's purple and has a Tropicana on it, and it's like
yeah.
we like the Tropicana in Atlantic City, so it's like, oh, this is cool, and just so you just find all these teams, and it's just so the thing I've always liked is not you cover the union, you cover other teams, that you just open up that world, and that's a credit to you guys for that.
Yeah, and I think it's always for me, it's always been like one of the things. I mean, the sport is association football, right? Like that's the sport that we love, and for all the people making fun of the name, like that's what it comes from, is in a way we call it soccer. And so this idea of how it's all connected, and no, we don't. We have a very imperfect system, a very problematic system. We could talk a whole podcast about what's going on with U.S. soccer. But at the same time, we do have a lot of teams, and like from the peewee, like the 4-year-olds that Jim coached when he was, finding his feet after retiring from the game, all the way up. There's soccer at every level, and it's important to sort of from just the context of how the sport works. And I think it's unique to other sports in that, obviously, in its purest form, it's promotion relegation, but there's still a connection point from the lowest levels all the way to the highest levels. And you can be a player who plays high school soccer, who plays club soccer, who gets a degree at Drexel, and you can make MLS. Like, is that the normal path that Kristovan took? No, but it happens, and it shows that there are different pathways in the system, and that there are connection points, and that that Jim's story of a guy who carved out a nice little professional career for himself, and came back and started coaching, and grew to where he is now, and will to where he will go wherever he goes in the future, if he's here or somewhere else, is it shows that connection point. And I think it's really, really awesome, and it's been really fun to recognize that the sport has a history. It's a little bit sordid, and there's lots of wars in that history.
Oh yeah.
I would say wars with a Z, soccer wars. And there's wars to still be kind of waged, and as we try to fix all this broken system that we have. But I think it's always, just for me, it's been important to sort of see the bigger picture, and draw attention to the bigger picture, because not a lot of people are.
Very true. Very, very true. And you're right. We could have a whole entire podcast about like about that. Yeah. So, but again, in closing, where can people find you?
Well, I mean, we'll see, right? I mean, I'm definitely on Twitter, as long as Twitter is a thing. And and then I mean, brotherlygame.com will, for the meantime, will be the site, and we'll hopefully be making some announcements pretty soon about what we're planning. And and then I think that's the main way to find me, is @MattRalph_TBG.
All right. Well, Matt, again, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
having me on.
We could probably go on another hour or two, but I appreciate we appreciate your
Yeah.
time. And as always, you guys can find us on Twitter at TOTWAG. That's the one team we agree on. And on Instagram and Facebook, we actually are starting to do stuff with those too this time.
Yeah.
And as on the one team we agree on. But for next time, I'm Kyle.
I'm Jillian.
And thank you guys again for tuning in. We'll see you.